All right, section 5.1, exponents. All right, so powers are when we have a base and an exponent. The base is the number that's written in large script, and then the exponent is the one that's written in small script and it's up in superscript. Okay, and the exponent tells you how many times to multiply the base by itself. All right, so 5 to the 6th power is 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. You multiply by 6 times. Not sure how many times I said that. Okay, and then be really careful. The notation here is when you have parentheses, everything in here gets raised to the 4th power. So negative 3 to the 4th power means negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. Okay? So let's look at example 1. A, we have 2 to the 3rd power. 2 to the 3rd power means 2 times 2 times 2. Okay, which if you multiply that out, 2 times 2 is 4, times another 2 is 8. All right, B, 3 to the 1st power is just 3. Anything to the 1st power is itself. All right, let's look at C and D here, and the differences between those two. All right, for C, we have negative 4 in parentheses raised to the 2nd power. So that means negative 4 times another negative 4, because the negative 4 is in the parentheses. So negative 4 times negative 4 gives me a positive 16, because a negative times a negative is positive. All right, in relation to D, where you have negative 4 not in parentheses, I have a negative, and then we have 4 times 4. The 4 is the only thing getting raised to the 2nd power, so we have 4 times 4, which is 16, but we still have the negative out in front. All right, if it's a decimal, it's the same thing. 0.5 raised to the 3rd power is 0.5 times 0.5 times 0.5. And when you multiply that, you might use a calculator. This gives me 0.125. All right, and then G. All right, notice we have 4, and then we have that multiplied by 3 squared. Order of operations tells us to do exponents first. So I'm just going to write the 4 down, and then I'm going to write the 3 squared out as 3 times 3. And then you multiply it out. Okay, don't say 4 times 3 is 12, and then say 12 times 12. It's just 4, and then 3 multiplied by itself twice. So when you multiply that out, that gives me 36. All right, now there is a button on the calculator that'll help you do this. Okay, if you see the little caret button, looks like a little rooftop. You can write out the base, write this press this button, and then write the exponent. It should work for you. But be real careful. If it's in parentheses, write just as it is. All right, you can pause the video, and I'm going to write the answers out here in just a second. All right, here are the answers. A is 27. B is 4. C is a positive 64. D is a negative 64. E, I'm going to go ahead and work that one out for us because it's a little bit different. E, we have 3/4 to the 3rd power. That means 3 to 4th times 3/4 times 3/4. Okay, the whole thing. And then you multiply each of those parts out. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. So you multiply the numerators together, and then you multiply the denominators together. 4 times 4 is 16, times another 4 is 64. All right, the good thing about these is if this fraction is in simplest form, before we raise it to a power, it's still going to be in simplest form. It will not simplify any further. All right, F is going to be 0.0081. There's a decimal and the 2 zeros. And then G is going to be 75. All right. Now, evaluating when you have an exponent in the problem. So for A here, we have 2x to the third, and x is 5. So that means 2, and then I'm going to put in parentheses that number that I'm inputting in, 5, replacing x with 5, and raising it to the third power. Okay? And so if you put that, that means 2 times 5 times 5 times 5. All right, the 5 times 5 times 5, which I would probably do first. That gives me 5 times 5 is 25, times another 5 is 125, so 2 times 125, which that ends up giving me 250. All right, for B, all right, I got 9 over a negative 3 squared. So I'll do the exponents first. That's negative 3 times negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 3 gives me a positive 9. And then 9 divided by 9 is 1. All right, pause it and see how you can do the practice, and I write the answers. All right, A, I believe, is 243. And C is going to be 6 over 16, which reduces 2, because 2 will go into both of these, 3 over 8. All right, now we have rules with exponents. All right, first one is the product rule. If you're multiplying two powers with the same base, you add the exponents. Okay, I'm just going to show you why that works here on A. All right, we have 4 squared times 4 to the 5th. If we write it out, that means 4 squared means 4 times 4. Okay, that's the 4 squared part, and the 4 to the 5th is 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. All right, and if you notice, we have 4 multiplied a whole bunch of times. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so that's 4 to the 7th power. All right, but instead of having to write it out like this, all you have to really do is say, hey, what are my exponents? 2 and 5. And what's 2 plus 5? It's 7. Okay, so it's just kind of a shortcut for doing that, is adding those exponents. So for B, I've got x to the 4th times x to the 6th. And so all I have to do is say, hey, what's 4 plus 6? That's 10, so my answer is x to the 10th. All right, on C, I've got y to the 3rd times y. But that second y, since it does not have a power, it's understood to be to the 1st power. So if I say 3 plus 1, I get y to the 4th. All right, for D, I've got y to the 3rd times y squared times y to the 7th. So I'm going to add up all of those. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 7 is 12. So y to the 12th. All right, for E, this works for numbers as well. When you have numbers in the base, negative 5 to the 7th times negative 5 to the 8th. I say, what's 8 plus 7? That gives me 15. So I get negative 5 to the 15th power. All right, and then for F, we have a squared times b squared. If the bases are different, we'd leave it alone. There's nothing I can do. I cannot put those together. So that's already in simplest form. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wait and put these answers to the practice ones on the PDF on the word notes that I'll put on Canvas. All right, let's use this when we have that product rule with multiple things. So 2x squared times negative 3x to the fifth. All right, when we have more than just the variables raised to powers, we're going to take the coefficients, so we're going to multiply those together. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. All right, and then we'll have the x part, which we have to the second power and to the fifth power, and we're going to add those. So 2 plus 5 is 7. Okay? Because remember, with multiplication, you can do it in any order. So I could have rewritten this as, hey, let's put the numbers together. 2 times negative 3, and then times the variable parts x squared times x to the fifth. Okay, but your answer here is the negative 6x to the 7th. All right, pause it, try the practice one, and then I'll put the answer up. All right, here's the answer. We have 15, because negative 5 times negative 3 is 15. And we'll have y to the 7th, because 3 plus 4 is 7. All right, when we have more stuff with it, we just do each individual part. So for a, we have x squared and x to the third. So if I say 2 plus the 3, that gives me x to the fifth. And for the y, I have y to the first, y to the second. So 1 plus 2 gives me y to the third. All right, for b, I've got a negative 1 understood in front times the 3. So for the coefficient part, I've got negative 3. And then for a, I have the 7th power and the first power. So 7 plus 1 is 8. For the b, I've got a 4 and a 9. So 4 plus 9 is 13. All right, pause it, and I'll write the answers up for practice 5. All right, answers for practice 5 are y to the 12th, z to the 4th, and then negative 7, m to the 5th, n to the 14th power. All right, next rule is power rule. When you have a power raised to a power, you're going to multiply. Okay, so you have y to the 8th squared. Okay, so that basically means y to the 8th times y to the 8th, which means all you have to do is add. 8 plus 8 is 16. So y to the 16th. Okay, but shortcut, you could just said 8 times 2, which is the 16th. So on b here, we have 8 to the 4th, and then raised to the 5th power. So the base stays 8, and then multiply 4 times 5, which gives you to the 20th power. All right, and then for c, we have negative 5 raised to the 3rd, and then that whole thing is being raised to the 7th power. So you have your base, which is negative 5, and then 3 times 7, which is 21. All right, pause it, and I'll write the answers to practice 6. All right, here are the answers. Z to the 21st, 4 to the 18th power, and negative 2 to the 15th power. All right, so notice when you multiply, you actually add exponents. In power rule, you multiply exponents. So gotta be really careful with that stuff. All right, when you have two things inside of parentheses, and that parentheses is raised to a power, everything inside, excuse me, gets raised to the power. So for A, S to the first, and T to the first, and then that whole thing is being raised to the fourth power, the S is going to get the power, and so is the T. So S to the fourth, T to the fourth. All right, for B, the 2 gets raised to the third power. So does the A. All right, and if it's a smaller number like this, 2 to the third power, we're going to go ahead and multiply that out. So 2 times 2 times 2, or 2 to the third power, is 8. And so we have 8a to the third power. All right, same thing for c. I'm going to get the 1/3 squared. So 1 times 1 gives me the 1. 3 times 3 gives me the 9. That's what happens when I multiply 1/3 by itself. M was raised to the first, and so 1 times 2 gives me m squared. N was raised to the third power, and so I multiply 3 times 2, which gives me n to the sixth. Okay, so we're raising each part to that power. All right, for D, the -5 gets raised to the second power. So -5 times -5 gives me 25. The x was squared, so 2 times 2 gives me x to the fourth. The y was raised to the third power, so 3 times 2 gives me 6. And the z was raised to the first power, so when it gets squared, it gives me z squared. So each individual part gets raised to the power. Pause it and I'll write the answers for practice 7. All right, here are the answers. P to the fifth, r to the fifth, 36b squared is going to give me 1/64, x to the sixth, y to the third, and then 81, a to the 12th, b to the 16th, c to the fourth. All right, your next rule is the power of a quotient rule. All right, we've actually already seen these with the fractions. All right, but if you have a fraction raised to a power, everything gets raised to the power. Same thing as in that previous rule, the power of a product. So for A, the number on top, or the variable on top, gets raised to the power, so m to the seventh. And the variable on the bottom gets raised to the seventh power. And so you have m to the seventh over n to the seventh. All right, for B, we have kind of a combination of rules. On top, x was raised to the third. When it gets raised to the fourth power, we multiply. So 3 times 4 gives me 12. On bottom, the 3 will get raised to the fourth power. I'll go ahead and write it out. And then the y to the fifth, when I multiply 5 times 4, that gives me y to the 20th. All right, and again, for numbers, we're going to go ahead and multiply those out, or do the exponent to them. So 3 times 3 is 9, times another 3 is 27, times another 3 is 81. So your answer for B would be written as x to the 12th over 81 y to the 20th. Again, pause and use your practice. All right, your answer in your practice, we have x to the fifth over y to the 10th. Each part gets raised to the power, the 1 times 5 and the 2 times 5. For B, 2 to the fifth, which will give me 32. A to the fourth, so I'll say 4 times 5 gives me a to the 20th. And then on the denominator, b to the third, 3 times 5 gives me b to the 15th. All right, now the actual quotient rule. When you have a power on top and a power on bottom and both have the same base, you subtract the exponents. Okay, and the reason being here, I'll show you on A. X to the fifth literally means x times x times x times x times x, 5 of those x's. On the bottom, we have x times x. All right, when we talked about when we simplified fractions, any common factors you have on top and bottom can cancel out. So this x will cancel out with one of the bottom x's, and the second x will cancel out with the other x on bottom. And so what you're left with is 3 x's on top, which gives you x to the third. Shortcut, just subtract the exponents. So for B, I got 4 on top with the 7 power, 4 on bottom with the third power, so we say 7 minus 3, and that gives me 4 to the 4th power. All right, for C, same thing. We have a negative 3, and then we say 5 minus 2 for your exponent, so you get negative 3 to the 3rd power. For D, these are not the same base, so there's nothing I can do there. So we're going to leave it as s squared over t to the 3rd. All right, and then for E, I've got multiple things going on. I've got the 2. There's nothing on bottom, so there's nothing to simplify that with. So I'll write out the 2. For the X, I've got 5 power on top minus 1 power on bottom. And for the Y, I've got 2 on top minus 1 on bottom. So your answer for that one is going to give me 2. 5 minus 1 will give me 4, so 2x to the 4th. And then 2 minus 1 gives me 1, so just y. Okay, and you don't need to and should not write that first power. It's just understood to be there. All right, stop, pause, practice, and I'll write the answer. All right, A will be z to the 4th. B will be negative 5 squared, which is positive 25. C is going to be 8 squared, or 64. D, nothing I can do to it, q to the 5th over t squared. And for E, I'll have 6x squared y squared. All right, and a few other things before we finish. Anything raised to the 0th power is equal to 1. Okay, as long as that base is not 0. Okay, kind of a weird rule, but it's just something understood so that it works in a pattern and everything works out in the rest of math. Anything to the 0th power is 1. All right, so A, 3 to the 0th power, that's 1. B, I've got a whole bunch of stuff, but it raised to the 0th power, that's still just 1. C, I've got negative 5 in parentheses raised to 0 power, so that's 1. All right, D, I've got a negative, and then I have 5 to the 0th power. So the negative is not part of the 0th power, so the 5 to the 0th gives me the 1, but the negative is still hanging out there. So notice the difference between C and D. In parentheses, it gets raised to the 0th power, it's 1. D, the negative is not in parentheses, and so you just write the negative and then do the 5 to the 0th. All right, for E, we have a whole fraction raised to the 0th power, still going to be 1. All right, and then F, we don't have parentheses, so the only thing getting raised to the 0th power is that x. So we have 4 times x to the 0th, which is 1. So even if the base is a variable, it's going to be 1 when you raise the 0th power. And so 4 times 1 ends up giving me 4. All right, practice, and then I'll write the answers. A is negative 1, B is 1, C is 1, D is 1, E is 1, and F is 7. All right, so it's a nice, easy, lovely rule, but there are some little small things you got to pay attention to. All right, so let's kind of put it all together, see if you can remember those. All these rules. A, we've got multiplication. That means add. So 7 plus 4 gives me x to the 11th. We have a fraction raised to the 4th power. So this is going to give me the top number, or the top variable, t, raised to the 4th power. And it's going to give me the bottom number, 2, raised to the 4th power. Everything gets a power. And so I would probably simplify this as t to the 4th. And then when you raise 2 to the 4th power, 2 times 2 is 4, times another 2 is 8, times the 4th 2 is 16. All right, and then for C, everything gets the power. So you get 9 squared And then power to a power you multiply. 5 times 2 gives me y to the 10th. And so I would simplify that out as 81. 9 squared is 81. And then y to the 10th. Try your practices. All right, here are the answers. You should have z squared over 12 squared, which is 144. All right, for b, we have 4 to the third, which is 64. And then x to the 18th. And then for c, we should have y to the 13th. When you multiply, you add. When you raise a power, you multiply. All right, and then finally, some really in-depth ones, perhaps. For a, I've got 4 squared, which is 16. And then 4 to the 0th power, which is 1. Okay, so notice none of our rules had minuses or plus, no sum or difference rules. So you just do each individual part and then do the addition or subtraction. So 16 minus 1 is 15. All right, for b, we have x to the 0, which is 1. So 1 to the 3rd power. And then 2 to the 0th power, which is also 1, raised to the 5th power. And 1 to any power is 1, so we have 1 plus 1, which is 2. All right, you could have also done the whole let's multiply the powers rule. So this would have given you 0 times 3, x to the 0th power. All right, and then 0 times 5, so plus 2 to the 0th power. And again, you get 1 plus 1, which is 2. All right, for c, everything gets raised to the power. So we have 3 squared on top. 7 times 2 gives me 14, so y to the 14th. All right, on bottom, we have 6 squared. And then for the exponent, 5 times 2 gives me 10, so x to the 10th. All right, and so that will end up giving me 3 squared is 9, y to the 4th. And on the bottom, we have 36, x to the 10th. And since the numbers, the coefficient parts will reduce, 9 will go into both of those. You'll get a 1 y to the 4th, or just y to the 4th on top, because the 9 will cancel out. It'll go to 1. And then 9 will go into 36 4 times. So you'll have 4 x to the 10th on bottom. All right, and finally for D. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do the top part. 2 to the 3rd power. 2 times 2 times 2. That's 8. Multiply powers. 8a, 3 times 3 gives me to the 9th power. And b, 4 times 3 gives me b to the 12th power. On bottom, I've got a negative 8, a to the 9th, b squared. And so now when I reduce 8 and negative 8, that will divide out to give me a negative 1. The a's, I say 9 minus 9, those go away. Go to a to the 0th, which is 1. And then 12 minus 2 gives me b to the 10th. So I have a negative b to the 10th power. Using all those rules there. All right, pause it and try to work out practice 12, and then I'll write the answers. All right, for this one we have 8 squared, which will give me 64. 8 to the 0th power is the 1, and so that gives me 63. On B, the first part gives me a whole bunch of 1, plus another 1, because I have the 0th powers, so that gives me 2. On C, 5 squared would be 25, and then 3 times 2, x to the 6th. All right, 15 squared would give me let's see, 5 squared is 25. 9 times 25. 225. And then 4 times 2 gives me y to the 8th. All right, and then we'll reduce that. 25 will go into itself once. So we have 1x to the 6th. You don't have to write the 1. And then 25 will go into 9, or 25 will go into 225 9 times. So we'll have 9y to the 8th. All right, and then on D, we have 2 to the 4th. 2 times 2 is 4, times another 2 is 8, times a fourth 2 is 16. Z has 8, so 8 times 4 gives me 32. X has the 5th power, so 5 times 4 gives me x to the 20th. And I have negative 16, x squared, or excuse me, z squared. X to the 20th. And then when I simplify, 16 divided by negative 16 is a negative 1. 32 minus 2 gives me z to the 30th power. And then 20 minus 20 gives me x to the 0th power, which that just turns into 1. So I can just kind of ignore that one. So I get negative z to the 30th power. All right. Hopefully you got these. Try them in my math lab. Feel free to email me with any questions you might have.